Visual novels are very niche. There are many reasons for that. You're mainly reading, which isn't something everybody's into. They're almost as anime as physically possible. And for some reason there are people that don't dig that? Weirdos. And of course many of them are ginormous time sinks which requires a lot of commitment. But despite of those things, the two most newcomer recommended visual novels are Danganronpa and Steins Gate, which always confused me. Danganronpa is so anime that it even hurts a hardcore weep like myself sometimes. There are so many cliches and plot conveniences. The way characters are written also relies on gimmicks instead of depth, most of the time at least. Those are things you grow a tolerance for in order to appreciate the good stuff. But that takes time, so I would never recommend someone Danganronpa as their first visual novel. But still, it's quite short and has some more conventional gameplay, so I guess it's not the worst thing to start out with. Steins Gate on the other hand fries my brain completely. It is really long, at least the original, fuck Elite. There's almost no gameplay, and the little bit there is also responsible for my only critique point towards the game. And of course, most of all, it is so deeply trenched in otaku culture, it's insane. First, it takes place in Akihabara. That's already everything that needs to be said, but I'll continue. Okabe is a chuuni, which a normie never heard of. Daru has some questionable moments. Mayuri is a brand of character you'll find nowhere but in Japanese writing. And Best Girl gets sometimes used to make fun of the tsundere trope, which is also pretty fucking anime. I can only think of one reason for recommending it to a newbie, and that's the 11 out of 10 writing, which at the end of the day can be appreciated by everyone. So what might be a great visual novel to start off with? I wonder. 999 is fantastic and deserves more spotlight, which I'm here for. So let's buddy cheeks and deep dive into the entire game, all the endings, and use this as a chance to shit on the other two games in the series. The game begins with a cutscene of an exploding ship. Context will follow shortly. We then jump to the protagonist Junpei, who finds himself on a ship. Before he can even begin to think about what's going on, the window in his cabin breaks and a huge amount of water comes in. That would suggest that this part of the ship is underwater, which is a yikes, so let's get out of here by solving puzzles. This is the gameplay of 999, and it's fine. You pick up items and use them on other places, or use them to get a clue to a puzzle. The puzzles range from playing a song on a wrongly tuned piano to somewhat complicated math. There's enough variety, but I'm one of the people that gets annoyed by the puzzles. I just want to enjoy the fantastic story, but oh well. During his search for items, Junpei sees himself in a mirror which jogs his memory. He remembers coming home to his apartment and noticing that the window is open. He tries to play it off but sees a person in the reflection who threw a smoke grenade that lands before his feet, forcing Junpei unconscious. He then got dragged onto the ship and we're back in the present. At the end of the puzzle section, we learn something very vital to the game, the concept of digital roots. Those will be relevant both in gameplay and story. It works like this. Let's take 5 plus 9. That would be 14, right? You get the digital root by adding together the two numbers of the result. So 1 plus 4 is 5. The digital root of 5 plus 9 is 5. It's simple and the game will drill it into your head over and over. By doing a puzzle related to digital roots, Junpei unlocks the door that trapped him. Before he can celebrate, a huge wave of water invades the entire hallway. Junpei runs up the stairs and notices that the place he was at is part of the D-Deck. Eventually he stumbles upon a group of people. Since they frantically run past him, he comes up with nicknames based on their appearances. The group finds a pair of doors who have the numbers 4 and 5 engraved on them. While Junpei watches them being confused, he hears footsteps coming from above and finds a young woman who seems quite familiar. She calls him by his name, which reminds him that she is Akane Kurashiki, his childhood crush from grade school. And now comes my biggest problem with the game. For no reason at all, she loses her footing and falls down the stairs, leading to Junpei heroically catching her. This is already kinda too much, but throughout the entire game we will have a lot of moments between Akane and Junpei which are so awkward, forced and dramatic that also really does not fit the tone of the game. I know it's build up for the finale, but I think Junpei and Akane are both better characters separated from each other. So prepare yourself for my bitching for each and every one of these moments. They start talking but get interrupted by a distorted voice. It is a person calling themselves Zero, also responsible for kidnapping all of the people in the group. He declares that the 9 people present are participants in the Nonary game. The goal is simple: leave the ship by getting through a door with the number 9 on it by 6 in the morning. He then begins explaining the game. All participants have a wristband with a number on it. At the same time, everyone has a bomb inside of them that will trigger when the heart rate reaches 0. And there is another situation which triggers that, but I get to that in a sec. To reach the number 9 door, the participants have to go through the other numbered doors like the 2 they see before them. 3 to 5 people can go through a door and everybody that registered their bracelet has to go through. The people going in get added into a digital route, and if it matches the one written on the door, it opens. Zero then wishes everybody good luck and peaces out. The group is of course in a panic and they don't even consider going through the numbered doors since death is so closely linked to them. Junpei thinks about the likelihood of him and Akane ending up here by chance. There has to be a reason. Pretty cool that Junpei immediately touches on that, and throughout the entire game he will prove himself as a really competent guy. Thank god, not another self-insert. The group decides to look around the ship for other ways to escape. They find several doors with keylocks. On them are different symbols related to astrology. While visiting the D-deck, the place Junpei woke up in, they noticed that the water flow from there stopped. Pretty curious if you think about it, but nothing they can do about it, so they return to the number 4 and 5 doors. Instead of going through though, they first get acquainted with each other. To avoid giving out unnecessary information, they decide on codenames based on their numbers. Junpei doesn't have to do that since Akane blurred out his name before Zero's announcement. The first guy calls himself 7 since it's the number on his bracelet. Then they go in order. Number 1 calls himself Ace for obvious reasons. Number 2 goes with Snake. Number 3 is Santa since Sun means 3 in Japanese. 4 is Clover, Junpei is 5. 6 is Akane and Junpei dubs her June. And number 8 is Lotus. They then notice that number 9 hasn't said a thing the entire time. Clover asks him if he's number 9 and he gives a very long and condescending yes. The man refuses to have a codename and says he has another plan. He grabs Clover and pulls out a knife to threaten her life. He wants to go through the number 5 door by himself and needs Ace and Clover's numbers to do so, since 9 plus 1 plus 4 is 14, which has the digital root of 5. With the 3 bracelets registered, the door opens and the knife man goes through by himself. Shortly after, his bracelet starts beeping, which leads to him panicking, and he screams out that somebody tricked him before meeting his demise. They open the door again and are confronted with the exploded corpse of the 9th man. Certainly traumatic, but Akane has the most extreme reaction since she drops to the ground, but Junpei catches her and notices that she has a fever. Akane dismisses that and we focus on the group again. They're discussing the 9th man until Santa misunderstands why he died, but Snake corrects him. He broke the rule that every registered person has to go through the door and got punished with an Since Snake has information that the others don't, he enlightens them. When he woke up, he noticed a piece of paper in his pocket. Because he's blind, Zero gave him bonus information. The rules of the game get properly explained to him. As previously mentioned, 3 to 5 people have to create the digital route written on the door to enter. They enter the numbers on a red. The reds are part of the numbered doors and essential to this whole thing. You put the palm of your hand before the scanner and get registered. If the correct digital route is reached, the door opens. Once you pass the door, an alarm starts ringing and you have to find the device called the DED. There you also have to register your number by placing your palm on the scanner. That's there to confirm that every person that registered on the red also went through the open door. If you don't reach the DED fast enough, the bomb inside you will explode, which is why the 9th man died. And that's the basic rule set. Get through the numbered doors by using digital routes until you find the door number 9. The end of the note says that this is powerful information and that Snake should choose wisely how he uses it. Considering that, it's pretty generous that he told everyone. Though he could be lying since no one else can read Braille. Of course, in a setting like this, you want characters that seem a little shady. The group tries to figure out Zero's identity based on things they have in common, but they can't think of anything. So they discuss the relationships between some people. Junpei and Akane know each other, but Snake and Clover do as well, because they're brother and sister. A few moments later, the clock rings and they notice that they've wasted an hour just talking already. Now most people are on board for playing the game. Santa especially. He's somewhat rude about it, but I like him. He speaks his mind and is fairly rational. The group then decides on who goes through which door. This is where you can make your first choice that's gonna influence the story. Going through door 4 seems reasonable since Junpei gets to be with Akane, but behind number 5 is the corpse of the 9th man, which might have some clues. Regardless, I went through door 4, which means Junpei, Akane, Santa and Lotus go through door 4, while Ace, Snake, Clover and 7 go through door 5. The other team goes first and through the closed door describes how this whole dead thing works. Everybody registers the number and the doors open. The alarm starts ringing and everybody's desperately looking for the dead. They find it and it looks just like the red but blue. They notice they're in a long floor where almost every door is closed with the exception of the 2 at the very end. Santa and Lotus examine one while Junpei and Akane do the same with the other. They find themselves in a cabin with a bathroom and a bedroom. Then you have some puzzle solving until you end up in the bedroom where suddenly a voiced scene plays. Usually dialogue during puzzles has no voice acting, so that means it's important. Akane talks about the Titanic and the occult. I guess the Titanic makes sense since this is a ship, but the occult is kinda out of nowhere. Throughout the entire game you'll have these seemingly random information dumps on really specific topics. On my first playthrough it really confused me since it seemed to be really separate from the plot, but of course it will all make sense in the end. So she mentions that the Titanic sunk because it transported a mummy which was stolen from a pyramid. Supposedly she was really pretty even as a corpse, not rotten or anything, because she was frozen even in the desert, and that's the end of that scene. Yeah, it'll make sense eventually. You can go over to the other room where after a while Santa will talk to Junpei about the Clover bookmark. He wants Junpei to have it since the 4 leaves mean hope, faith, love, and luck, and he hates those. Yeah, another one of those scenes. At the end of that puzzle section, Lotus also gets a confusing scene. She talks about people receiving information subconsciously. As an example, she uses a picture which was shown to a group of people and 3.9% were able to recognize the dog in it. A while later, a completely different group of people did the same test. 6.8% of them recognized the dog this time. She laughs it off in the end, but as the player, I was just baffled at that point. What does this have to do with anything? Before I end this puzzle section, I wanted to mention that Lotus and Santa got some really nice dialogue, which I won't go in depth in for the sake of the video length. Just Akane was a bit annoying with her flirting. For solving the last puzzle, the group got the mask key, which lets them leave this section. But the next puzzle room is only a few steps away. The kitchen, which has a storage room where Akane's next weird scene happens. This time it's about the Titanic sinking being predicted years before it happened. And eventually they managed to get inside the freezer. It was a setup and Junpei, Akane and Santa get locked in. Lotus coincidentally exited before the door got frozen. She tries to help from outside but with no success, so the gang has to do it from the inside. Well, isn't this the perfect time for another voiced scene? Akane mentions that there is a kind of ice that doesn't turn into liquid when it goes above 32 degrees, because the melting point is 96 degrees. It's called Ice 9. She also tells a story similar to the one of Lotus. Something received information subconsciously and changed its behavior. After that, the group manages to escape from the freezer and finds Lotus just sitting there doing nothing, and a fantastic scene happens. She doesn't really seem concerned. Junpei got angry, but Lotus argues that there's nothing she could have done, which is true, so Junpei's rage has no real target at this point. So to find the target, Junpei considers that she trapped the three of them inside, which is of course stupid since she's fucked as well if they died. Junpei apologizes and Santa again tells them to get back to what's important. Eventually they finish the room and get out. Now they can check out D-Deck, which is still filled with water, so they move to C-Deck and can choose between two paths. One leads to a pair of elevators, but the Mercury card is required to use them, so the other way it is. A huge corridor with a million doors. They go to the very back and end up in a huge room filled with hospital beds. But 4 more doors as well. 3 of them are digital root doors. But for some reason the attached threads are not functioning. That's really weird. With such a huge setup, it's very unlikely that Zero would make such a simple mistake. But before the team can speculate, the rest join up with them. They checked out some of the rooms in the long corridor, but they're all hospital rooms as well. That leads Seven to think that they are on the hospital ship Gigantic, the sister ship of the Titanic. Supposedly, a man called Lord Godane bought it. He was a Titanic survivor and got obsessed with anything related to it.
But hey, that's just a theory.
Then Lotus casually drops that Seven still doesn't have his memory back. Junpei is understandably confused, but Seven has amnesia and he told everyone before Junpei met them. Then the clock rings again. It's midnight, so only 6 more hours left. They decide to look for the missing red parts in the million rooms. After an hour, everybody meets back up. Junpei joins when everyone is staring at the reds because they're repaired somehow. Nobody takes credit for that, which is strange, but speaking of strange, Snake is missing. His sister of course runs off looking for him. Lotus suggests to leave the two of them behind, once again showing her questionable morality. Everyone splits up once again to look for Snake. Besides Junpei and Akane, they went together. They first stumble upon Lotus, who suggests for the 3 of them to work together. Use the chaos to go through one of the numbered doors. But their digital route is 1, which is useless. She suggests to add 7, but that doesn't work either since they need to get through the number 9 door at the end. Lotus is definitely a shady person, but in a situation like this, people like her give me a certain amount of comfort. It is really unlikely that people like her are the mastermind or related to them in any way. Those people wouldn't be so blatantly antagonistic like Lotus is. I was pretty certain at this point that Lotus isn't Zero or anything. They then stumble upon Ace and discuss Snake's and Clover's relationship. They're supposedly siblings, but Junpei questions it since they don't look alike, which does seem kinda random, but as with everything in this game, it will make sense at some point. Junpei and Akane move on and find Clover, but nothing comes from that, since she's emotionally distraught right now. Then they return to the big hospital room where Santa hangs around. He asks Junpei who repaired the rats. None of the options really lead to much. Santa just wanted to state that one of them fixed the thing, though he can't think of why they did that, but it's probably related to Snake's disappearance. The rest join them and discuss what to do now. Of course, Lotus suggests to sacrifice one person. That does sound extreme, but as per usual, she has an explanation. With the people present, it's impossible for everyone to get through the 3 doors. The morally best thing would be to only sacrifice one person, which is true, I guess. Lotus is no angel, but calling her a bad person would be wrong. She's just very much a head person and her heart is kinda dragging behind, but for the most part, she means well. Akane and Lotus argue while Santa is once again the voice of reason. You should aim to bring the greatest amount of happiness to the greatest amount of people. When said like that, it's hard to argue against. Santa and Seven agree with her even though they don't like it. Ace then declares that he will be the one to stay behind, but he says he won't sacrifice himself. He expects them to get help and come for him. Junpei argues that it's stupid since it's very unlikely they'll find help that fast, but Ace shuts him up with questioning who he'd rather sacrifice. sacrifice. Everyone but Akane agrees to Ace's proposal, but the man suddenly collapses. Akane helps him up and he holds a syringe filled with Soparil Beta. He claims it's just an anesthetic. He used that on himself to take a nap while waiting. At this point I was so fucking confused. Look at this realistically. You're on a ship with people you've never met before. Eventually, for some reason, you decide to sacrifice yourself for them, but not just that. In case some of them don't agree with your action, you take some medicine to brute force your decision? Does that make any sense? At this point I was highly suspicious of Ace, but the rest decide on who goes through which door. I choose door 8, which means Akane cannot come with Junpei since it's mathematically impossible. Of course, she throws a tantrum, but 7 calms her down. It's likely that all of them will meet again, since otherwise it would be impossible to get through door 9. So Junpei, Lotus and Clover go through door 8 and end up in a laboratory. Junpei wants to talk with Clover, but she completely closes herself off from everybody, which leads to her getting locked up in a section of the lab. So the goal is to get her out of there, with some good old puzzle solving. One of the puzzles requires PC knowledge, which Lotus has plenty of. I want to mention that depending on the specific route you take throughout the playthrough, scenes change. In this run I got pretty much nothing interesting from visiting the laboratory, but I'll revisit this place later on and will get to immensely important scenes. But yeah, eventually Clover gets out and we leave the lab and stumble upon the others. Just as 7 said, we'll meet again. The unnumbered doors now opens and lets us return to the big hospital room. Every team got a key or keycard in their rooms and the group now wants to move on, but Clover stops them since she wants to check out door 3 because Snake might be there. 7 and Ace help her to get through the door. Of course, Lotus suggests that the rest also should get going. Just check out where the keycards lead and then go back again. They split into 2 teams, Junpei and Akane and Santa and Lotus. We then arrive at the elevator to use the keycard on, but the thing goes down, which might mean they'll end up in D-Deck, which is flooded. Akane tries to communicate that in the most awkward way possible, and Junpei of course misinterprets it, which results in quite the funny scene. Miscommunication humor is always a 50-50 for me, but this time it works, mainly because they just don't stop, it goes on and on. Eventually they realize the elevator goes down to E-Deck and that's fine. Down there they find the door number 6 and with that go back to join with Santa and Lotus. On their side they found door number 1. Back in the hospital room we find Ace, Clover and 7 looking sad and empty. 7 claims they found Snake's corpse. As a player I was quite confused. The way Snake has been written until then makes it really unlikely that he would die off screen like that. He's been presented as a very intelligent and competent man, someone that doesn't get stopped by his lack of eyesight. Because of that my first theory was that there's something wrong. He might be Zero and faked his death, but then I thought, from a meta perspective, Snake being Zero would be really anticlimactic. The reveal of the mastermind should be surprising, so the guy that's really intelligent and gets shit done being Zero would be too obvious. It's always interesting to see how your perspective as the consumer influences your view on the events of a story. The other 4 check out the body as well, which is possible because 7 stopped the numberless door from closing, so there's no need to register on the red. The group arrives in the shower room and see huge red blood splatters. They look around the corner and do see the dead body of Snake torn to pieces. Junpei describes the whole thing in gruesome detail and of course Akane again freaks out. Junpei calms her down and everybody reunites again. They try to be considerate of Clover, but 7 eventually speaks it out. It's likely some people here killed him. It has to be at least 2. They got Snake to register his number and once the door opened he was pushed through, and since the others didn't register on the dead, he died. Considering Snake's characterization, that's pretty unlikely, but the characters roll with that for now. Eventually the discussion lands on Zero, whether he's one of them. He doesn't have to be since the whole system operates by itself, but let's be honest, everybody knows it has to be one of the people present. Anything else would make for a less exciting story. For some reason Ace really argues against it. Lotus brings up a really big point though. Why would Zero risk his life by participating in the game? That's a really tough one, so it ends that conversation. Then everyone goes to another elevator and they use the Mercury card to eventually stumble upon the number 2 door. We then jump a bit into the future and Junpei is picking up papers with numbers on them. Everyone got to decide on a door they want to go through. 1, 2 or 6. But Junpei put a really sneaky one which gives him the option to choose his number after hearing everybody else's. Santa is onto him but couldn't figure it out. I choose door 1, which means Junpei goes with Ace and Clover. Looking at it now, it was stupid since it's just like the lab. Some really interesting scenes can happen behind door 1, but I don't meet the requirements, so not much of note happens. The group ends up in the chart room and puzzle time begins. At one point Junpei tries to talk with Clover about the situation, but she has no interest in sharing her feelings. Ace barges in on them and through his own sneaky move figures out that Junpei was cheating during the door selection. This seems to be another really weird scene because who cares, but of course it will make sense in the end. It's just so cool how well written it is. Every single detail matters and is relevant, tons of foreshadowing, love that stuff. Right after the chart room comes the captain's quarters and a little surprise awaits them. Another corpse, but someone they've never seen before. Next to him a bloodstained axe. The person is in the captain's quarters, where's wears the captain's uniform and has a bracelet. Kinda laying it on thick. But nothing else happens in the room, so once they leave, Junpei notices that Clover is kinda far behind and checks up on her. He notices that her pockets are full and asks what's up with that. She avoids it and runs past him. While seeing her from behind, Junpei wonders why she has this huge stick sticking on her back. I wonder. Shortly after, everyone meets up again and the other group reports that they found the door 9. Everyone is getting ready to go there, but Clover questions if they don't want to see what's behind door 2. They have enough time. There could be something valuable there. After a short discussion, they chose to go there real quick and end up before the elevator. To get the digital route, Santa, Clover, Akane and 7 are required. They take the elevator and for some reason, Ace just asks Lotus if she can come with him, leaving Junpei by himself. What? At this point, Ace is easily the most suspicious person. The whole Superreal Beta bullshit and now this. But Junpei has no choice and just waits for somebody to return. Eventually, he hears the elevator making noise and waits for its arrival. Out of it only comes Clover. Junpei questions where the others are. Clover seems a little off and drops this before his feet. She killed the others since she suspects they're involved with Snake's death, and not long after she also ends Junpei's life. The first ending is achieved and oh boy, shit got intense. I do quickly want to mention the OST that plays at the very end of every ending. It's I'll hold back for now, but I will jerk it off real soon. This is considered the X ending for obvious reasons, and now the flowchart opened up. From here you can jump to every point in the story and make different choices. There are also markings for spots where you can unlock some relevant stuff in order to get the true ending eventually. I choose to approach this by starting from the very first choice again, meaning we're back to shortly after the 9th man met his demise. This time I'll go with door 5, which Akane of course doesn't want since the two of them will be separated. But because of Junpei's choice, teams have to be rearranged, which ends up with Clover leaving her brother's side. She speaks out against it of course, but Snake whispers something into her ear which seems to be enough to convince her. So Junpei, Snake and 7 go through door 5 now. They check out the 9th man's body and notice the bracelet lying beside his glasses. After that they move into the first class cabin. Puzzle section begins and at some point 7 talks to Junpei about his amnesia. Junpei is shocked that 7 is so calm, but 7 drops some real wisdom. Why worry about something that you can't change? True, in this cabin you can also find a safe which seems relevant given the Nonary game setting, but it doesn't open even after all the puzzles are solved. Before leaving the place, 7 makes sure the door doesn't close on them, which would seem suspicious if this was your first run, but we already saw 7 do that for a good cause, so even if he doesn't want to say why he did it, I trust him. Immediately following that is the casino and nothing happens there, so let's move on. Once they leave that place, the game once again clearly characterizes Snake as a person capable of taking care of himself. We once again stand before the Mercury elevator and Junpei makes a joke which really cracks 7 up, making for a really comfy atmosphere. Then the whole hospital room fiasco takes place again. This time I go through door 7 with Clover and 7. We end up in the operation room and stumble upon a medical mannequin. 7 and Clover are bickering a little and Junpei drops one of my favorite lines in the game. Anyway, it looks like he's got something the two of you could stand to have a little more of. I'm talking about a heart. Never change, Junpei. After some time, we end up in a room filled with medicine. 7 finds a bottle with, yep. It made him remember a story which is similar to Akane's and Lotus's information transmission stories. Weird once again, but Clover stops them. We then complete the room and everything plays out as we already know it. Until I get to choose again after the Big Zero discussion. This run I go with door 6, which means Junpei is going with Ace, Santa and Akane. They arrive at the massive steam engine room. Shortly after, Akane again almost faints, which means it's up to the rest of us. Nothing of interest happens here, so at the end Ace tells Junpei to get Akane while he and Santa keep an eye on the open door. Santa claims that even if it closes they can just open it again, so Ace suggests all 3 of them get Akane and Santa says he's fine with Junpei getting her, and Ace asks if he's just being interested in being contrary. I love this scene, it's such a throwaway moment but it really humanizes Santa. We all know moments like this where someone just says stuff to say something. Great moment, but let's move on. Junpei picks up his princess and they return, but find Santa sitting on the stairway looking at a picture of his sister. He then tells the story of the 2 Santa Clauses. A long time ago there were 2 Santas, one wearing black and the other white. The white one gave presents to the good kids while the black one played tricks on the bad ones. Eventually the black Santa's prank started to get worse and worse, which led to the white Santa stabbing the black one, dyeing his clothes the iconic red we know now. Symbolism, which will make sense later on. Next up is the storage room. In there they find a coffin, but inside is a gun and Junpei decides not to take it since it creates a power imbalance. Well yeah, but you have to consider all the possible downsides downsides of not taking it, but I have nothing to say, so moving on. A new elevator brings the four into a room where they find the door number 9. But that's not all, behind Junpei is another one, which actually makes sense. With the 2 doors, all 9 people can get through both doors, but since there's already 2 dead people, things are more complicated. With the numbers present, the group cannot escape, but by abandoning Akane, the guys could. Thankfully, all of them are against it and they decide to find the others and think of a solution later on. Once they leave, we hear a knocking and the camera perspective suggests it comes from the coffin in the room. We meet Lotus and Seven and they arrive with bad information. Clover is missing. She shut herself in a room and has been missing since. They split up to look for her. At some point, Junpei takes an elevator down and finds this. A stab wound on the stomach seems to be the cause of death. Junpei notices that her bracelet is gone and concludes that the person that killed her has to be the person that profits the most from having the number 8 bracelet. Before Junpei could think about who that is, he falls to the ground and looked the culprit in the eyes, but didn't have the power to feel anything from it. With that, Junpei dies again and I achieved the knife ending. We're back at the flowchart and this time I jump to the moment after Snake's disappearance. Finally, I choose to go through door 3, but Santa states that with their numbers, it's impossible. It would end up with people getting left behind. I still insist on door 3. Junpei claims that he has good reason for wanting to go through there. He gets Seven and Akane to register themselves on the red, and from there on he forces Lotus and Santa to realize the situation. Either Santa or Lotus and Clover can go with them through door 3. The rest gets left behind. Lotus grabs Clover and makes a run for it, but Santa is faster and registers himself on the red. Akane is justifiably scared of Junpei's ruthlessness. Santa goes in on him, showing that he's a pretty good guy, but Seven stops him since there's nothing you can do about it now. Even though we know that all the ways loop back into the hospital room, Junpei didn't. He just sacrificed 2 people for his own benefit. Damn, but Seven's right. They stumble upon the shower room and discover Snake's body, which again leads to Akane freaking out. We get a painful scene between the two and start the puzzle. Santa eventually talks to Junpei about heat, which is mostly foreshadowing. Nothing else happens there, so we end up again in the hospital room. Lotus slaps Junpei, which is deserved. Seven tells her and Clover to check out the shower room, and Ace does the same. The Zero discussion takes place again, and once we find door 2 again, Junpei, Seven and Lotus go through. They end up in the confinement area. There, Seven remembers a huge amount of information. He's been in a similar room before. He recalls the names Aoi, Light and Nona. Kids were here to take part in an experiment about trying to control people. Seven was a cop that was investigating a case about a group of missing children. He was caught though and ended up in a cell just like the one we're in right now. Eventually he heard children's voices and figured out it's coming from an air vent covered by a metal grate. He manages to tear it off somehow, but that's it for now. Same with the puzzle. The torture room follows right after. One of the puzzles requires for one person to have their brain operated on, and Lotus volunteers. See, I knew she has a heart, but if something happens to her, she wants Junpei to tell her daughters that she loved them. Eventually it comes up that one of her daughters is named Nona, which is a name we've just heard. Now things are slowly coming together. More and more people are getting connected to this place, even though at the beginning it seemed like the people had no similarities. Eventually Nona returned but didn't say anything to her mother about the experiments, which led to Lotus investigating the thing by herself but without success. The whole thing seems to be swept under the rug. Someone influential seems responsible. Seven name drops Cradle Pharmaceuticals. All the kidnapped kids visited a hospital which Cradle had influence over. Then Seven talks about the Gunsfeld experiment. It's another transmission story. One person sees something and the other person has to guess it purely by person 1 thinking about it. But the group cannot figure out what that has to do with their current situation and move on. Once they're out, they stumble upon the Jupiter door. Problem is they don't have the key. Just out of desperation, Junpei turns the doorknob anyways and it opens, meaning it's been unlocked by someone else. Surprised, the group walks down the stairs to find 3 people at once. Seven checks if Clover's really dead and yeah, no doubt about it. This is a fantastic setup. Encountering an already open door creates a very slight feeling of uneasiness since it's a new thing, but then finding 3 familiar faces dead on the ground is pretty shocking. Especially since we already know Clover is capable of killing somebody and obviously she can be excluded as a potential culprit. Lotus then puts her hand into Junpei's pocket and gets the sun key. A killer's running around here somewhere, so of course she wants to get away. When thinking about who did it, Akane pops into Junpei's head since there aren't many options left, unless some people have teleportation powers and haven't told us. Lotus puts in the key but she doesn't feel the lock turn. And well, as it turns out, the door also has already been opened. They go through to find a massive gate without a doorknob or anything of the like. Almost as if on cue, the gate opens and Seven drops some wisdom once again. This shit is suspicious as fuck. 3 doors that didn't work the way we know them, 3 dead people, things are looking pretty fucking bad. But Junpei thinks it could not be worse and rushes through the open gates, just to get proven wrong. Once he arrives in the new room, he sees a familiar face. Akane is lying wounded on the ground. ground. They have another cringy moment before she passes away. Junpei is done. His mind and heart got completely broken in the span of 10 minutes. Aimlessly, Junpei exits the room and stumbles upon the corpses of Seven and Lotus. He didn't react. He just stared at the lifeless bodies, noticing that Lotus's bracelet is gone, just like it was the case in the knife ending. That suggests the same killer did these things. Junpei doesn't know what to do and walks back into the big room. He notices that a submarine is there and approaches it, but then a knife enters his flesh, he loses the strength to stand and falls into the water. In his last fleeting moments, Junpei wonders who is this person, who killed them and how did they do it. But that's the last thoughts he gets to have. This ending is in my top 10 favorite gaming moments. I love it so much. I played Silent Hill, Resident Evil and a bunch of horror games. None of them even come close to the chilling uneasiness I had during my first time seeing this ending. It is so well done. The main reason this ending works so well is the element of surprise. At this point in the game, most players have a sense of familiarity with the way of the story. People split into groups, find clues, weird off stories, but then comes this ending and throws a shit ton of new stuff at you. And best of all is you can somewhat figure out who the killer is. It's pretty fucking tough and I'm sure no one ever did, but if you analyze every single sentence since the Jupiter door, it is possible. And the end when Junpei ends up in the water and this track plays. My god, goosebumps every single time. I love this game. But there's still one more ending to get before the finale, so let's do just that. I jump back to the first class cabin with Seven and Snake, but this time, before exiting the room, I look at the closed safe. Still, nothing can be done about it, so we're moving on. Nothing new happens until I get to choose the next door. I go with Clover and Lotus, which brings us back to the laboratory. During the hacking scene, Lotus has some new dialogue though. She now brings up the topic of prosopagnosia. That's an illness which makes human faces indistinguishable for you. As an example, Lotus brings up monkeys. For us, all their faces look the same, but of course, they have different faces. So people with prosopagnosia distinguish people based on voice, clothes and the like. Wow, what a quirky random thing. I'm sure that's not gonna become super relevant later on. Clover also has valuable information. Junpei asks if Snake was born blind. She says it happened in an accident and he lost his left arm as well. Now he has a fake one. Another time skip later, I choose the door 6 again. Back in the huge steam engine room, but Santa has a new story to tell. Some scientists did an experiment with rats. They filled a C-shaped tank with enough water that rats could drown in it. There's one A and one B exit. The A path is pitch dark while in part B the water is electrified. Since the rats have no way to tell the danger and route B, they choose that. After a long time of repeating the experiment, the rats manage to find the exit faster and faster with each following generation. Eventually, the rats from another place manage to do it without even trying route B. Yes, the telepathy stuff is getting pretty clear at this point, thanks game. At the end, Santa also has more dialogue and relation to his sister. They lived by themselves and Santa tried his best to provide for her, but he failed and she was killed 9 years ago. In the following room, Akane has another breakdown and Junpei pushes the puzzle on his hands to Ace. Akane once again shakes off Junpei's concern, but Junpei mentions that she needs to visit a hospital as soon as possible. Santa just casually drops that Ace is the president of Cradle Pharmaceuticals. That rings a bell, and guess what, their flagship product is Sulfuril, which Ace used to fall asleep. Santa claims he's got the info from Ace himself during the first puzzle room. Junpei looks over to Ace, who is struggling with the puzzle. He just has to put the pictures of the group into the right number slots. How hard can that be? When Junpei questions him about that, he just excuses himself with exhaustion and old age. But Junpei remembers Lotus mentioning the sickness which prevents you from recognizing human faces. That would explain Ace's struggle with a first grader picture puzzle. Still, there doesn't seem to be any reason to bring that up, so Junpei keeps it to himself. Then we once again hear from Seven and Lotus that Clover is missing. While searching for her, Junpei and Akane end up in the shower room and check on Snake again. While investigating the body, Junpei notices a bone sticking out of his left arm. Wait a minute, didn't Clover mention that his arm is fake? Well. Seems like Snake is alive somewhere. After some more looking around, Seven founds them and delivers the news that Clover is dead. Everybody is waiting in the first class cabin. Her body is in the bathroom. Junpei asks who found her first. Seven did. Back when we first visited the room, Seven stopped the door from closing, which Junpei finds suspicious. Seven shows Junpei the safe, which is why he wanted to return here. He agrees that this thing is suspicious as fuck. Nearby is the knife man's body and Junpei decides to check it out again. And well, would you look at that? Spot the difference. Because he cannot trust anyone right now, he claims that he noticed nothing. Seven shows Junpei that Clover has a piece of paper in her hand. It says the following: now you have to solve it. Truth can also be considered right and gone would be left. On the bracelet are two things sticking out which can be pushed in. So put in the right combination and your bracelet shows a code: 143833421. After using that to open the safe, we get another piece of paper. It says the exact same game was played 9 years ago. Snake participated back then as well. These four planned the whole thing, and they have to be punished for their crimes. Written by Zero. Junpei wants everyone to follow him to the hospital room. He has a pretty good idea of who the killer is. Once there, he wants Ace, Seven and Lotus to register on the red. This confirms to him that you don't need to place your palm on the scanner. The bracelet just needs to be close enough. With his bracelet as well, the door opens. 1 plus 5 plus 7 plus 8 is 21. He then asks Ace if he knows who Junpei is. Junpei, of course, but he claims he is Santa. The clothes he's wearing he borrowed from Junpei. Ace of course disagrees, since if he was Junpei, the number 3 door wouldn't have opened. Before he can finish his explanation, he realizes the trap he walked into. Of course he's Junpei, but why didn't Ace just say, "Dude, I see you right before me, the fuck you talking about?" His explanation makes sense for somebody that doesn't see Junpei's face. Now everybody learns that Ace has prosopagnosia. That is important, since it's pretty likely that a person with this illness killed Snake. Junpei has 3 pieces of evidence. Back when a discussion about leaving somebody behind took place, Ace volunteered to stay behind. If you remember, it was impossible to go through door 3, but that's because Ace took himself out. And what's behind door 3? The supposed body of Snake. He didn't want them to find out. The second point is that he has prosopagnosia. The body in the shower room isn't Snake. Junpei names him Guy X and Ace is completely surprised by that. If he was not faceblind, then he would have had no problem realizing who the person was. Ace's defense is his lack of motive, but that's bullshit. Snake knew about his past, so he posed a threat. Because of that, it's possible Snake would have a grudge and might attack, so Ace took the initiative. Junpei then shows everyone the note written by Zero. One of the people responsible for the last no-Nary game was the Cradle CEO, and Santa immediately connects the dots. Ace admits that he is Gentaro Hongo, but denies any ties to the prior no-Nary game. He then questions how he was supposed to push Guy X through the door by himself. He needed at least one accomplice. Now comes the 500 IQ move. Junpei says he took something from Ace's pocket while he was asleep. He checks his pocket, proving that he's hiding something. The bracelet from the 9th man, which he picked up while everyone was split up searching for Snake. That's enough to get through door 3. That bracelet is really powerful since it does not affect the digital root. He also picked up the man's knife, which heavily suggests all the knife-related killings were on Ace. On his way back, he stumbled upon a man wearing Snake's clothes. The man seemed dazed, almost like he just woke up from getting drugged. The man was not able to resist, so Ace registered his bracelet and pushed him through the door. He also killed Clover because he was afraid Snake told her something. Ace admits he was defeated, but not by Junpei. This whole thing was perfectly set up for Ace to get discovered as the person that hosted the last no-Nary game. A man with Snake's clothes and bracelet, which only Ace could have confused for Snake, appeared. Zero specifically targeted Ace. God, this scene is so good. Junpei is just on a fucking roll. He mindfucks Ace, the others, and the player. But Ace then pulls out the gun from the coffin and takes Lotus hostage. 1 plus 8 plus 9 is 18. Hongo now also admits to killing the 9th man. He recognized the man and decided to get rid of him. Both of them knew how the game works, but Ace told him the rules were changed. The 9th man believed it and ran straight to his death. Ace killed him since the 9th bracelet is OP. Also, the man knew about his past. And he wanted to confirm whether this game is serious or some excessive prank. He moves towards the 9th door, but before we can follow, Akane breaks down again and Santa stays behind with her. Seven and Junpei cannot open the 9th door, and just as it seemed hopeless, knocking sounds came from the coffin. To open it, a code is needed, so they try the one for the safe, and it works. Well, who do we have here? We catch him up on everything. Well, mostly everything. Snake claims he was knocked out and put into the coffin. That's all he has to add. But the 3 of them still cannot open the number 9 door. Seven then reveals he has found something, but avoids mentioning it was from Clover's corpse. It's the Zero bracelet. She got that from the captain's quarters, which we already know from a prior ending. Now Seven and Snake can open the door. Or not? Snake suggests that the 0 is actually another number. They test the combination, which reveals it's actually a 6. Junpei and Seven can go through now, but Snake claims he has a secret weapon which he uses to also get through the door. He pretty much broke his prosthetic arm and got rid of the bracelet. He didn't use that earlier since it casts a lot of suspicion. Eventually they end up before an incinerator, which is gonna activate in 10 minutes. Inside is Ace dragging Lotus with him. Ace again has trouble recognizing Snake with his outfit and then touches upon Clover's state. He reveals that he killed her, which throws Snake into a blind rage. But you cannot really do much against the gun. Lotus used the moment to escape. Before Ace can do something about it, Snake rises up again, taking the rest of the bullets. He then clings onto Hongo, refusing to let go no matter what. Seven forces Junpei to leave. Ace and Snake meet their end seconds after. A lifeless Junpei then drags himself to an elevator with the goal of finding Santa and Akane, but they're nowhere to be found. Out of desperation, he returns to the room with the 9 doors and finds Akane there. A painful scene later, Zero chimes in and claims it's game over. Junpei screams that nothing's over. Zero then gets really meta by saying he chose the wrong path. Junpei still denies it, but Zero then clarifies that they are the one who lost. Then Junpei heard a sound and runs out of the room but finds nothing. And the moment he returns into the room, his mind gets broken. Akane is nowhere to be seen. In a span of a few seconds, she disappeared from the face of the earth. What the fuck is going on? Before Junpei can find an answer to that, a smoke grenade lands before his feet, knocking him unconscious and ending the game. My god, what a mindfuck ending. So many reveals and even more questions. And the final moments with Zero are just insane, but they will make sense soon enough. Yeah, for the snake scene you have to suspend your belief, but I think it's fine. Now we've met all the requirements for the true end. For that you have to start from the beginning and pick a very specific path while always making the right choices. First up, we again have to go through door 4 with Akane, Santa and Lotus. The important part here is to accept the Clover bookmark from Santa. In the next puzzle section you have to learn about Ice 9 from Akane. The next step is choosing door 7 and checking out the operation room again. During the voiced conversation with 7, Junpei can now bring up Ice 9. He name drops some Alice and claims that she's a mummy that doesn't melt at room temperature. Haven't we heard that somewhere before? 7 tells everything he remembered. Back when the Titanic sunk, the Sea Ice Mecha Bandit collected the dead bodies. Of course, all the bodies were frozen solid due to the weather. One of the things they've also picked up was a coffin with a body inside. But she looked like she was just sleeping. Still, she was frozen solid like the rest. Once the ship returned to land, the bodies fought, but not the woman in the coffin. Months passed, summer happened, and she stayed frozen. Word got out and people started calling her All Ice, Alice. One day someone stole the body and she ended up in an auction. Supposedly, a man named Godane bought her. You might remember the name? The man also bought the Titanic sister ship, and 7 believes he hid Alice somewhere on that ship, because Godane told a friend Alice is asleep in a small chamber past the Forest of Knowledge beneath the navel of the Gigantic. The theory is that we're currently on that ship, so we might find Alice. At the end of the section, Clover and Junpei have a conversation, and since she's pretty down, Junpei can give her the 4-leaf clover. He states that the 4 sides represent hope, faith, love and luck. Junpei tries his best to give her hope and gets asked about his thoughts towards experiments. Junpei is understandably confused. Clover seems to have expected something because of the bookmark. We don't know the connection between the two, so Junpei digs deeper. Clover tells him about the experiment that happened here 9 years ago. Communicating through fields you cannot see was the goal of the whole thing. She then brings up the whole ship of Thesis thing, trying to explain that everyone is connected, so there is a subconscious connection between all of us. For the next new scene you have to choose door 1 with Ace and Clover. The puzzle room is split into 2. Clover and Junpei are in one room and Ace in another. At some point Ace just barges into the room and Junpei reacts to it quite aggressively. He even questions himself why he did that. I wonder. Junpei also wants to talk with Clover alone. He wants to hear more about the experiment, but Clover doesn't want to talk. Instead they theorize about Snake's killers. It has to be 2 people at least. Junpei says it's technically possible that it's 4 people, but Clover will bring in a compelling argument for that being very unlikely. If it's only 2 people, then the only mathematical option to get through door 3 are 7 and Santa. Clover then shows him why it's unlikely that more than 2 people were involved. She lists down all the mathematical options for door 3. She trusts Junpei enough to eliminate all combinations with him in it. Then she also scratches out herself and we end up with 2 options. Junpei doesn't think A is possible since Akane is in it, which is... From a meta perspective it definitely feels like jinxing himself, but Clover trusts him enough to scratch Akane out as well. That leaves only option E. That would mean everyone but Junpei, Akane and Clover are working together. Seems pretty unlikely. With a numbers advantage like that, there would be no need to keep a secret. The only explanation they can think of is that it's 7 and Santa. Of course, as the players we have the actual answer, but it's still a cool scene, since it shows the characters using their brains and it establishes Clover trusting Junpei this time around. In the next room, Junpei comments on the guy with the Zero bracelet. He's obviously set up to look like Zero, but it's so obvious that it must be on purpose. Junpei thinks it's to taunt him, which is not the reason, but it's a good guess. Junpei eventually mentions Snake's body being in a worse state than this man. For example, the bone sticking out of his arm. Clover of course instantly realizes that the body is not Snake. She also thanks him for the Clover bookmark, but Junpei mentions that he got it from Santa along with the hope, faith, luck and luck saying. Clover is shocked and claims that Santa was on the ship 9 years ago as well. She then blurs out a lot of stuff out of context and then begins telling things more chronologically. 9 years ago on this ship the exact same game was played. 9 kids were on this boat while their 9 siblings were in an identical building over at Nevada. The goal was for the children to enter the morphogenetic fields. Essential for that are epiphany and danger. An epiphany is when an answer seemingly pops into your head. That can be transported via the fields. By adding danger it gets easier to send the information. That's what the Nonary game was made for. Adding the life and death element. And one girl did die on the ship, which Snake was also on. Clover meanwhile was over in Nevada. A little while later Ace and Junpei find a book and inside the Uranus keycard, which is for the library. That can be interpreted as the Forest of Knowledge, which 7 mentioned. That's where Godane supposedly hid Alice. Ace then tells a story which if true might mean Alice is alive and on this ship. Clover again picked up the Zero bracelet from the corpse. They meet up with the rest and everybody moves towards the 9 door. Akane mentions that it's because of Santa that everybody gets to leave together. 7, Lotus and Santa would have made the 9 and could have escaped, but Santa said that they won't leave behind Akane. Isn't that interesting? Once they arrive, they sadly realize that it's impossible for everyone to leave. Junpei then takes a closer look at the room and notices it looks like it's set up for some religious ceremony. After some silence, 7 gives up and says he'll stay behind. Mathematically, that would work out, but Lotus is the first one to deny his offer. Might it be another case of subtle foreshadowing? I wonder. Everyone disagrees with him, but Santa has something else to say. He wants to leave 3 people behind. He quickly unleashes his inner Sonic and points a gun at Akane's head. I was so fucking confused at this point. How many different parties are at work here? What is going on? He forces Ace and Lotus to register on the red and they go towards the exit. A short while later, the knocking on the coffin happens again, but this time we don't have the code to open it. So Junpei just gets information from the prior timeline. The usual. Well, I guess we've officially entered the fantasy realm. I don't really mind that, but I can see some people disliking it. Till now it's been really realistic, but I think it will pay off during the ending. Snake arises from the coffin and his sister jumps into his arms. They catch Snake up on everything and plan to go through the other number 9 door. But Junpei asks them to not go through the door once it opens. He then calls Clover out for taking the 0 bracelet and once again figures out that the actual number is a 6. But that creates the question, are there 2 number 6 bracelets? No, Akane actually has the number 9. They write down all the doors she went through and notice that Santa always was with her. He actually has the 0 bracelet, which would make sense. 0 and 9 together don't influence the results. So as long as Akane and Santa stay together, they can masquerade their true numbers. That's some big brain shit that suggests Santa is at the very least connected to 0. But just before they leave, Junpei thinks about the fact that it would not make sense for Akane to have the number 9 bracelet since there already is one. If 2 6s are not okay, then why should it be okay to have 2 9s? But Junpei keeps that to himself and moves on with the rest. They find the library and Junpei demands the full truth from Snake. He reveals that the note in Braille from the beginning also has a threat. If he talks about the last Nonary game, then 0 will kill his sister. He then confirms that Santa was on the ship as well 9 years ago because he knows the Clover saying. The people responsible were Hongo, Nijisaki, Kubota and Musashido. They wanted to control the human mind with the magnetic fields. They believe those exist and if you can manipulate them, you're unstoppable. If a person has access to the field and is powerful enough to control the masses, then they have near infinite power. But also important is someone that receives it. Not everyone has access to the fields, so for the beginning they plan to have 9 pairs of siblings being sender and receiver. They were split into 2 groups and forced to play the Nonary game because the life and death situations ease the field access. Hongo told the kids in the Nevada building that they have to solve the puzzles and send their siblings the information via the fields. If they fail, their siblings die. Suddenly Junpei questions if there really were 18 children. The news only reported on 16. That's because one pair didn't have any relatives that could have filled a police report. The brother's name is Aoi and the sister, well, her name is Akane and she kinda died. Junpei has something like an out-of-body experience out of sheer shock. He huffs a dangerous amount of copium and hopes it's just another Akane. He wanted to ask her last name but was too afraid to do so. After the library they find Zero's experiment room. You can see all the puzzle related things lying around. This is where they probably worked out the entire system. Eventually they find another coffin. Junpei and 7 are about to die from the anxiety but no one is inside. Besides that they also get this picture. The 4 fucks responsible. Ace we already know, the nerdy guy was the 9th man and the old dude was the corpse inside the captain's quarters. The tall man is the snake fake that was used to trick Ace. Clover never saw them before because she was in the building while they were on the ship. 7 also got all his memories back and tells the entire story. He left off when he heard the kids' voices through a vent. He rips it open and crawls through to end up in an incinerator which we already are familiar with. There he finds a group of kids. Snake, Santa, Nona and I wonder who that is. 7 goes back and makes a rope out of bedsheet. The kids climb up when they hear a sound from outside. A maniacal Hongo has a breakdown and barges in but with no success. Everybody runs off. During a stair climb, Santa realizes that his sister is being left behind and runs down with Santa and Snake following him. They find Hongo dragging the girl back into the incinerator. The 3 guys try everything they can but with no success. The door opens and presents a disturbing scene. 7 then asks if they knew about Santa and Akane being siblings. Clover didn't. Snake didn't recognize his voice because back then he was right in the middle of puberty, so he didn't suspect Aoi being Santa. The final puzzle room ends and we end up in the incinerator again and find Santa on the ground and his gun being taken by Ace. Akane is also there with a fever. He plans to leave thanks to Lotus and the knife bracelet. Junpei has another time travel moment before Ace registers the numbers, but the door does not open. During his panic, 7 fucking knocks him to the ground. Ace then figures out 7 being the detective from 9 years ago. Junpei confronts Ace about killing his 3 prior allies. Kubota he already explained in a prior ending. Nijisaki was the snake fake so Ace had no idea. Musashido's death is is the most interesting. When they investigated the chart room, Ace said he needed a pocket watch from Junpei for the other room. Since he designed the Nonary game, he of course knew all the answers to every puzzle. He used the pocket watch to speedrun the puzzle and already went to the captain's quarters by himself. Musashido was sitting there almost brain dead with an axe right next to him. Ace somehow did not question that and rammed the blade deeply into the other man's chest. He then returned and slipped the pocket watch into Junpei's pocket. Ace then shows a piece of paper he found when he first woke up. Zero wrote that Ace can also escape by admitting his crimes before a camera. To make the confession more credible, he left him a witness in the captain's quarters. Ace did everything to arrive there as fast as possible, and once he was there, he noticed that Musashido couldn't resist, so he killed him with no hesitation. And of course, Ace fell for every single trap set up by Zero. Junpei calls out Santa for being Aoi Kurashiki and Zero. He confirms being Akane's brother Aoi, but he's not Zero, just an assistant. But then he finally drops the big goal. What was all this for? To save someone, his sister. But Seven claims that she died 9 years ago, since that's what he saw with his own eyes. Junpei and Seven turn around and see Akane disappeared. Seven gets a headache, and well, that's just the consequence of dabbling with time travel. Santa then confronts Junpei about exactly that. He had information he shouldn't have, and somebody does answer. Junpei knew because they knew. He got the information via the morphogenetic field. They described themselves as Zero, or someone that will become Zero. Santa then pulls the gun on Ace and forces him to get up. Junpei is confused about his plan, and Santa claims it's time for him to make a wish come true. He leaves the incinerator and turns it on. They try to go through the 9 door, but not all of them can go through. Lotus is okay with sacrificing herself, but this time Seven is the one to stop her. God damn it, you two, get a room already. But the main problem is that the door doesn't open for 9. Something's up. Junpei loses hope and we switch perspective. Akane answers some of the biggest questions. Akane from 9 years ago has been connected with Junpei for a while. She saw everything through his eyes. She lived in 2 realities at once, the present and the future. She solved the puzzles on the ship by looking through Junpei's eyes. We see Snake giving the kids on the ship some hope. He teaches them the Clover saying. We then see the whole escape scene from Akane's eyes. From Junpei's perspective, a device rises up in the middle of the room and the exact same happens for Akane. Hongo then claims that Akane can escape because he registered 2 bracelets already, and once Akane solves the puzzle, she can register her number and escape. Akane calls out for help with all her might, and the 2 of them connect. Junpei takes it up to save everyone by solving this puzzle. It's not really that tough, and once it's done, Junpei realizes how the final door actually works. Everybody scans their number and it works. Akane solves it as well and reunites with her brother. Then everybody escapes and we jump back to Junpei. The group finally experiences sunlight again and they realize that they've been in the Nevada building the whole time. The bracelets fall off, and of course there never were any bombs inside any of them. Only the 9th man because of his crimes. Nearby is a car which they use to chase after Akane and Santa. Now we get some questionable retconning. Junpei asks Ace why he created the entire Nonary game. He delivers some stupid bullshit that doesn't matter. When I first played through this game, I was kinda disappointed that Ace was such a simple, evil character, but upon replaying it, I changed my opinion, because almost all characters are morally very grey. Junpei was ready to sacrifice Lotus and Clover. Santa has no problem killing the 4 creators of the game, which are still human beings. Clover literally killed people in another ending. Akane literally killed 3 of the game creators. Lotus did and said some questionable things. Snake and Seven are the only guys that didn't do anything too questionable. So having somebody so comically evil is actually a wise choice, I'd say. And then Junpei hits on the obvious inconsistency. Seven saw Akane's to a crisp burned body, and yet in the same timeline he saw her older self being alive. What possible explanation could there be? Well, I can't think of one, and it seems like the writers couldn't either. It gets suggested that Seven lied? Like, what? Why even bring up this point? It's so weird. Time travel is a thing that only triple S tier writers can handle properly. It's like navigating a minefield on ultra nightmare difficulty. But I get why so many writers try it. If done well, it peaks incredibly high. Does 999 handle it well? It's whatever in my opinion. It leads to a very emotional climax, but also creates a ton of plot holes in an otherwise airtight story. So yeah, it's okay, which is way higher praise than 95% of all the other time travel stories would get from me. Clover, who's driving, notices that there is somebody hitching a ride, and well... What a way to sequel bait, Jesus. The entire Alice bullshit doesn't even lead to anything in this game. What a fantastic game. Besides the time travel, it has 10 out of 10 writing. Almost all the characters feel so 3-dimensional, and I love the atmosphere. I will never stop singing the praises of the submarine ending. Like I said previously, my only big critique point are the melodramatic romance scenes, but that as well makes the ending more emotional, so it wasn't for nothing. But I swear, every time Junpei and Akane were together, I was on edge because I was afraid of the next dose of cringe. Now, before I I end this shit, I want to touch on the other games real quick. 999 is part of the Zero Escape series and I played them, not really a fan. Zero Time Dilemma is just the definition of a 5 out of 10. I cannot make a video on stuff like that. Virtue's Last Reward is more complicated. When I first finished it, I liked it and asked myself if it's better than 999. And now it's a clear fuck no. That game is the definition of style over substance. I was blown away by the 1000 plot twists that happened in the last 16 minutes, but it's all so over the top and stupid and contrived. 999 is quite down to earth. Virtue's Last Reward is insane from the get-go. One character is just constantly in a piece of armor, robots and way more stupid shit. I prefer the style of 999. It's kinda like with Danganronpa 1 and 2. The first game held back its insanity for a good while. The second game was batshit insane from second one, but in that series it worked. Virtue's Last Reward's insanity is off-putting. I'm not a fan, so I'm not gonna make videos on the other games. But yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, I believe 999 is the best beginner visual novel. Very down to earth, short, and has a good amount of gameplay. Love it. And with that being said, thanks for watching.